But out of the Manhattan Project, the Manhattan Project has come some characteristics of the nuclear industry, and that is secrecy. And when secrecy doesn't work, there's cover-up. You might be following Fukushima issues, and we keep finding that TEPCO didn't tell the truth. The Tokyo Electric Power Company didn't really give us the full picture of what was happening. And so this is the cover-up. And then if the cover-up doesn't work, then they minimize things. They say, you know, it's really not very much. 10 days after the Fukushima explosions occurred, there was radioactivity from Fukushima in the milk in Boston. But our EPA tells us not enough to be worried about. Quite frankly, it worries me, because if you tell me that the radiation is there, it may not be very much, so not very many people may get it, but if it happens to be in your glass of milk, your cup of yogurt, your scoop of ice cream, it's a very big deal. So also, so let me talk about price a little bit. The many ways that we pay a price for nuclear power, and I'm talking about financially. I'd point out that in 1953, Lewis Strauss, the head of the then Atomic Energy Commission, made the statement that many people still remember to this day, that nuclear power is too cheap to meter. What a great thing. It's you know, too cheap to meter. Well, the real truth of it is that at the time he gave that talk, he had in his possession a study that the government had done, looking at the feasibility of nuclear power. And do you know what that conclusion of that government study was? The main problem with nuclear power was cost. So right from the get-go, there's been kind of a two-faced approach here, that it's not too cheap to meter, it's really terrifically expensive. So we've been paying, too, for the past 72 years for the nuclear weapons infrastructure. There's a broad range of activities that go on to make a nuclear bomb. The Manhattan Project in 1942 created, in secret as I mentioned, a whole industrial infrastructure that was the same size as the then automobile industry. So this gives you some idea of, you know, from the mining, refining, enriching, all the steps in the nuclear chain. It's a tremendous industrial enterprise. So we've paid for that, too. But here we are today about nuclear power in particular. And one of the ways that the taxpayer is saddled with the burden of the cost of nuclear power is through nuclear loan guarantees. A number of nuclear executives have stated publicly that without nuclear loan guarantees, there would not be a single new reactor built in this country. Now, the smart money of Wall Street doesn't want to invest in a nuclear reactor. You'd think if they were so great, people would be rushing to put money into it, but they aren't. And so the taxpayer is the person who takes the risk. I call this nuclear socialism, because what's happening is we're socializing the risk, as all of us are going to take the risk, but then we're privatizing the profits. So it's an odd kind of socialism. With the nuclear loan guarantee, if the project fails, we pay. If the project succeeds, they get the profit. Now, in 2007, the Congress appropriated $18.5 B as in boy billion for nuclear loan guarantees. There was a big push. You might have heard of the so-called nuclear renaissance. We still haven't seen any masterpieces from them, but it's trying to be a renaissance. But not a penny of that $18.5 billion has yet been spent. It's been on the table for 7 years now. Now, we may find in the very near future at Plant Vogtle in Georgia that they may conclude negotiations for $8.3 billion of that money. But the argument that's been going on for a number of years has been how much risk should the company take? And the Southern company doesn't want to take much risk. They want to build the reactor, but they want us to carry the risk. So I ask you, is this really a very good deal? Another way that there's a big price on nuclear power is through what's called construction work in progress. And this is a state-level legislation which allows a utility company to increase rates for the ratepayer, to pay for a private corporation to even consider whether or not they want to build a new reactor. If a company starts to say, let's study, what the economics of building a new reactor would be, they charge the ratepayer to pay for them to study whether that's a good business deal. In the same way, the construction work in progress, if they decide to go ahead and build something, will pay for the construction. But the company is under no obligation to ever deliver an electron of energy to the ratepayer. They might do their study and decide, it's not a very good deal. They might kind of agree with many of us that it's not a good deal. Or they might start building it and run into problems and just stop. But they've got the ratepayer's money. They don't have to pay it back. They're under no obligation. This takes place in Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, and even here in Michigan. At Fermi 3, there was an attempt to get construction work in progress money passed. It was not passed, but it may be coming around again, so I'd alert you to pay attention. So those are two ways that we pay a price to help build new reactors. For operating reactors, again, the risk is so great that no private insurance company will cover the cost of or cover the liability insurance. So again, we, the taxpayer, are the insurer. We're paying their liability insurance. The nuclear industry does have, each reactor has to make a contribution to a fund if there's an accident, $100 million each. Sounds like a lot of money. There are about 100 operating reactors, so it's $10 billion. But a nuclear accident, the price tag's going to be in the hundreds of billions to the several trillions of dollars. And again, that would come out of our pockets. So it just doesn't seem like a very good deal to me. We're seeing this happen in Japan, where TEPCO right away was out of money, so the Japanese government is paying much of the cost of trying to clean up that terrible situation. And the last place where we pay a price is in the government, the U.S. government taking possession of the waste that's generated by the reactor operation. Now, one technical term for that waste is spent nuclear fuel. But I don't like that term because spent fuel sounds like it's all over with. It's kind of like you put gas in your car, you drive around, and the tank's empty. With nuclear fuel, you take fuel rods, which aren't, they're made out of uranium. They aren't very radioactive before they're used. After they're used, they're terrifically hot in temperature and radioactivity. So this is what the government has said we're going to take. Now, you can make an argument that says this is nuclear bomb material. You don't want that floating around in the world. It's maybe a good idea for the government to take it. But the government's had some problems. They promised the nuclear reactor operators that in 1998 they would start taking this waste from the reactor sites. If you've been following the Yucca Mountain issue, where in 1987, and this is the political part of Yucca Mountain. It's not Harry Reid and what he's done in the last few years. It goes back to 1987. There was a scientific process looking at 10 different sites for where we might locate a repository in this country. And Congress up and just decided that we're going to choose Yucca Mountain. That's the only place. And I ask you, if you have to store something for millions of years, would you really choose a place that's porous rock, that's in an area of earthquake activity, in a place that has volcanic activity, and is over an aquifer? Because these are the characteristics of Yucca Mountain. So Yucca Mountain is a flawed geological site, and the politics were in making that choice in 1987.